さん、こんばんは。シャンです。もう日本10年間ぐらい住んでいましたけど、あまり、研究の言葉わからないから、今日の講演は英語でよろしくお願いします。So I'd like to talk to you about a concept of having a mission to the Earth. And I would like to discuss with you about how I and other researchers are tackling the challenge of trying to understand the diversity of life on this planet and how our understanding, our increased understanding of the diversity of life on this planet can teach us about where we have come from, the origin of life. But before we talk about some missions to Earth, let's briefly view some missions to other planets. Here's the Mars Curiosity rover, sent by NASA to Mars. It's amazing. It's big. Look how big it is compared to this researcher at NASA. It's full of scientific equipment, spectroscopy, lasers, and so on. And we've learned a huge amount about the planet Mars from our rover. Over the years, NASA has sent a series of landers and rovers to Mars, and we've learned a huge amount about the planet. It's amazing. I think we've all seen in the news in Japan in the last week or so. Japan is also exploring other planetary bodies. In this case, here's the SLIM lander, which landed just very recently. You can see it's tilted to the side a little bit, and this gave rise to it's not charging its battery by its solar panels, but it's an amazing lander. These landers help us understand where planets come from. These landers help us understand the composition of the Earth in relationship to these other planets. Is the Earth special? How is the Earth special? Where did the Earth come from? These are very, very important questions for us to understand. About 10 years ago, before I came to Japan, I was working close to NASA's JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where these rovers are manufactured before they're sent to other planets. And my longtime collaborator and friend, Mike Russell, told me one day, "Shawn, we need a mission to Earth." This is an interesting concept. We think we know the Earth. We live on the Earth. We feel the Earth. We see the Earth. But I want to suggest to you that the Earth has many, many secrets. And that the Earth, by studying the Earth, the contents of the Earth, studying life on Earth, we might learn deeply what is life. We might learn how did life begin. And we might learn about what is the history of life on Earth. When I think about these questions and how to answer these questions, my mind goes immediately to microbes. Microbes contain many of Earth's secrets to answer these questions about how did life start, what is the history of life on Earth, and what is life. We can think about microbes as archaea or cocycine, bacteria, cycine, and they're a great unknown. There are many, many types of microbes. Let's look at these shapes on this screen. In the top left, my screen on the top left is a little bit cut off, so I have to ask you to excuse me. But this is a star-shaped microbe. I didn't expect to see a star-shaped microbe. Many microbes look like this microbe here, but look at all of these different shapes. This one looks kind of like a maitake mushroom, I think. But look at the scale bar here. This is something like 1/10 of a human hair. Very small. If we think about all of these different types of microbes, the diversity of these microbes is much bigger than the diversity of animals and plants that we can see around us. Think of all of the types of animals you have seen in your life, all of the insects, all of the plants. That amount of diversity, that evolutionary time, is very small. It's very compact compared to the diversity that we find in microbes. Here's an elephant and a whale. They look pretty different, but compared to the diversity of life that we find in microbes, these creatures are almost the same. One swims in the water, one walks on land, but their physiology, their chemistry, is almost the same. Plants are a little bit different, but very closely related compared to the diversity of life that we find in microbes. If we think about how many types of life there are on Earth, it looks like, in our current estimates, there's about 1 trillion species, 1 trillion unique groups of life on Earth. This is a big number. I have a difficult time imagining 1 trillion. It's big. Here's a beautiful starry night. We can't see the stars like this in Tokyo. It's too bad. But maybe if you go camping in Nagano or if you go to Hokkaido, maybe you can see stars like this. How many stars can we see on the most clear night? We can see some thousand stars, maybe 3,000, 4,000 stars. It's a lot of stars. On a very clear night, you can see the Milky Way. You can see satellites. It's a lot. And it makes us feel small. It makes us realize that we're part of a really big universe. But we can only see 3,000 stars. This pixel contains around 20 million pixels. It's a lot of pixels in this image. It's hard to imagine that. It's a much bigger number of pixels compared to the amount of stars. And there's about 1 trillion types of life on Earth. It is huge. The diversity of life on Earth has almost not been seen. A great part of this diversity is in microbes. It's so hard to see them. They're so tiny. Look at this line here. This is meant to represent a human hair. Human hair is about 100 microns. Microbes are about 100 times smaller than that. So we can see a human hair. We can see a little bit smaller than a human hair, but not much more. Microbes are much smaller than we can see by our eye. So they're hard to find. They're hard to look at. But microbes are everywhere. This is my daughter, An. It's Anzu no An. And she's covered in microbes. And so are we. We're all covered in microbes. Every night, I try to remove the microbes from An-chan's teeth. Her teeth are covered in microbes. It's very difficult to remove the microbes from her teeth. Here's a beautiful plum flower. It's covered in microbes. Here are some of my favorite microbes. Here I am near Hiyoshi buying vegetables at the Mujin Hanbaijo, and these plants are covered in microbes. Microbes are small. Microbes are everywhere. Microbes can teach us. They can give us hints. By studying microbes, we can find which microbes were first and which types of life were first, and hints about how did life begin. How can we do this? Today, the easy way to do this is by studying DNA. In the last 10 or 15 years, it has become easy and cheap to sequence DNA, to sequence genomes. We can go to any environment and extract DNA and sequence the DNA. And we can compare life, compare DNA. Charles Darwin, when he was studying evolution, he compared organisms by using qualities like size, like shape, like voice, and color to try to infer evolutionary relationships between organisms. So here, this bird on the bottom may have given rise or evolved into these birds on top. This doesn't work with microbes. Their shape is not an evolutionary characteristic. So instead, we use cheap and easy DNA sequencing and compare long stretches of characters like these protein sequences shown on the bottom of this screen to find evolutionary relationships between organisms. When we do that, we find that the relationships between all life on Earth can be summarized in a diagram that looks like this. This was first summarized by Carl Woese in the United States in the late 1970s. Since then, this relationship has become somewhat more complicated, but the general trend holds true. It looks like on Earth there was some very ancient life, what we call a common ancestor. From that common ancestor, there was a pretty great divide in the types of life on Earth between cosykine, archaea, and psykine bacteria, and lots of subsequent evolution into the bacteria that we see today. Lots of evolution into the cosykine archaea that we see today. And also organisms like us, what we call eukarya. It looks like there are three major types of life on Earth: archaea, eukarya, bacteria. Here we are in this eukaryotic branch of the tree of life. Animals, fungus, plants, yeast. The evolutionary distance between us and elephants, us and whales, is very short. It means that we have not been on Earth for a very long time at all. Us as types of organisms. If we look at the evolutionary distance between archaea and bacteria, the distances are very long, very different from one another. It looks like these organisms have been on the Earth for a long time. Actually, we don't know how long these organisms have been on Earth. The oldest evidence of life on Earth is about 4 billion years ago. But we have zero idea what type of life that was. There's a large gap in our understanding of when these major groups of organisms came. to be. As we search for organisms on Earth, sequencing DNA, finding new groups of species, year by year, the number of species increases like this. This is an exponential increase. So our rate of discovery is only increasing. It depends on if you look at things in a positive view or a negative view. Maybe we know more than we did in the past, but maybe today we know how much we don't know. The more we learn that we don't know. There's so much to learn. Our discovery rate just keeps increasing. I want to introduce briefly how I started thinking about these questions, where I come from. Here's my hometown in Montana, in the United States. It's about 2 hours by car from Yellowstone National Park. And Yellowstone National Park has a very large volcano. Here it is. Look at this volcano. It doesn't look like any volcano I've ever seen in Japan. This is a different type of volcano. The edge of the volcano is somewhere around here. And all of this interior is the caldera of the volcano. This is a caldera that you can drive through. It's kind of a strange feeling, driving through a caldera of a volcano. It feels stable, but as we know, especially in Japan, the Earth is not that stable. In general, it's stable on our lifetime, but over geological periods of time, the surface of the Earth is not stable. It's mixing. And about every 300,000 years, this volcano explodes. It's not a gentle explosion. It's a very large explosion. And it exploded about 300 years before, so it's close to happening again. But for now, it's a beautiful place with lots of wildlife, buffalo, wolves, mountain lions, bears. It's amazing. And it also has many hot springs because of this volcanic activity. So I grew up here learning about Yellowstone, hot springs, volcanoes. And I went to a university even closer to Yellowstone. And at that university, I was part of an institute called the Thermobiology Institute at Montana State University, MSU. And for many years, people have been studying these hot springs in Yellowstone and thinking about the possible analogy or possible similarity between these hot springs, like this one here shown on the right, and geological situations which may have existed on the early Earth, like this artist's image of the ancient Earth on the left. Maybe these hot springs can contain some ancient life. After I graduated from university, I moved to another U.S. university next to NASA's JPL. This is where Mike Russell told me, we need a mission to Earth. I moved to Japan, I took my job as a professor, and I found out that Japan has many amazing onsen. So many onsen. It's amazing. Which prefecture has the most onsen? Oita. We have a onsen expert in the audience. Thank you. Yeah, Oita has a lot of onsen. Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I'm usually going to Shizuoka. It's very close. Has a lot of onsen, but Oita Ken has lots of onsen. Some onsen look like the early Earth, like this onsen here called Jinata Onsen. And these onsen have many interesting microbes inside of them. So what we are doing, me and other researchers, we're going to these locations that seem like the early Earth, and we're using them as windows to study the early Earth. We go to these springs, we take water, we analyze the chemical composition of the water, we count the number of microbes, we sequence the DNA in the microbes, and it looks something like this when we go. Moving around, taking water, taking samples to count microbes in the lab. We want to determine the relationship between the water chemistry and the microbes. Camera fell. We have an idea or a concept that a hot spring like Jinata might be used as a time machine. The start of this onsen is here. And the start of this onsen is very similar to the early Earth. Low oxygen, high iron. There's not a lot of microbes here. The water flows and it mixes with the atmosphere. Oxygen increases. Iron is still high and there's more microbes. The water keeps flowing. More oxygen is mixed. Less iron because of the mixing with oxygen, and there's more and more microbes. Finally, the hot spring water dumps out into the ocean. Today's ocean is full of oxygen. Actually, it has less microbes. There's almost no iron in today's ocean. So we're thinking that we can use this onsen to try to make a map and trace back in time, perhaps to somewhere close to the origin of life. We still have a long ways to go to do this, but this is the vision. Go to these hot springs, sequence DNA, look at evolutionary relationships, try to see if we can find the oldest microbes. Our knowledge is increasing so fast, exponentially. As we walk out along these edges and we fill them, these edges, with increasing amounts of information, we can look with more clarity into the past and try to make inferences about historical states of life on Earth. On this type of a diagram, we can come from the left and come from the right. Try to point back, try to guess what the most ancient states of life may have been like. This exponential increase in knowledge is really fun. It's an amazing time to be a biologist. We realize how little we know. Every day, almost every day, we can make a small discovery by looking. It's really easy to find things that we don't understand. And the majority of life on Earth has never been seen. The vast majority, never been seen. So we have a lot of work to do. That's fun, that's great. Hot springs on Earth, they contain many interesting microbes, and they might be similar to microbes that were on the ancient Earth. Japan, and especially Oita-ken, is full of hot springs, and it's a really, really amazing place to do this type of research. We know very little about what the earliest life was like. But today's Earth might hold the secrets. By continuing to study life on Earth today, we might be able to peer back in time and guess how life might have started and to gain an understanding of the history of life on Earth. So we're on a mission to Earth. Terasaka Sensei introduced this, but I want to come back to it because it's so important. We're part of Japan's WPI Research Center initiative. To me, as a non-Japanese person, this is amazing to learn about for me. The support from the government to build these international level research centers is amazing to address fundamental questions like the origin of planets and the origin of life. This is something I think we can all be very, very proud of. This is very rare in the world, and it makes science in Japan very special in my view, and I'm very happy to be part of it. What is life? How did life begin? What is life's history on Earth? These are key questions that we're trying to address, in part by conducting research on hot springs here in Japan. That's where I'd like to end, and I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. Thank you very much.